Okay, so hopefully you can see that. Uh, my name is Chris Dignam, and I'm a professor with Governor State University. But just as a little bit of background before I begin my presentation, um, before becoming a professor 4 years ago, I'd spent close to 30 years in education, which included high school and middle school, where I served as a science teacher. So I taught biology, chemistry, physics. And as my career progressed, I moved into administration. So I was a principal at three different high schools, which were in the city of Chicago as well as suburban areas around Chicago. So my experiences there as a teacher and a principal were in the United States around Chicago. And lastly, I completed my career as a superintendent. And just for clarity, the superintendent is someone who supervises the principals in different communities. So I would work with the mayors in different cities and supervise all of the principals. And so that was my job for about 30 years. So now for this is my fourth year at the university, I am looking at a lot of practice that can be put in place for improving teaching and learning, specifically in the areas of STEAM education. And so my presentation is basically multiplying art across STEM for improved creativity and looking at how that acronym of STEAM can and does improve student learning, but the teaching and administrative supports that are needed to do so. So what I want to do is just go through this and see if there's any questions at the end. So in terms of why I'm focusing on art integration into STEM is that the research I'm conducting right now, looking at art with science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and those four traditionally form what are called STEM. The integration of art adds an advantage for teaching and learning and things like engineering or maybe mathematics classrooms, tech classrooms, science classrooms, where there can be more hands-on types of learning. And those things are already taking place, but when you integrate art, there's an emotional quality to art that tends to hook students into the learning and capture their imagination and their interest. And so by having a philosophy of going from STEM to STEAM, it promotes a multifaceted experience where students are able to use their, kinesthetic types of learning, visual learning, ways of expressing themselves and performing research into their learning for more meaningful types of authentic experiences. So that authentic piece is incredibly important because it creates meaning. And art, when integrated into STEM, helps students also see relevance in learning. So when things are authentic and you have an emotional attachment to it, the outcome is that students see beyond the classroom and applying real world scenarios. And we want more female students, we want more students of diverse backgrounds, and more students in general going into areas of science, tech, engineering, and mathematics. And so having those real world connections is something that um, better supports the philosophy of STEM. And so, not assuming everyone knows what STEM is, or for the sake of being very clear, STEM is a unified educational framework. So it's a philosophy of interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary approaches for learning, where the connections between the subjects and within the subjects, it's more integrated. And so it better supports students in developing well-rounded understanding of the world around them. And it's a unified approach. And so those are the three areas of consideration for STEM. And when you include the art, of course, you have STEAM. And so it's a medium for blended learning. And so that's a more natural way of learning because it's actually the way that very young learners begin learning. When you look at the world around you, you're not just thinking of science, you're not just thinking of art. It's blending the aesthetics, the sounds, the touch, the feeling of the learning that's taking place. And so that cognitive type of development is more integrative for those disparate subjects that tend to be, as students move up in grade levels, more isolated. So as students move from kindergarten to first grade to middle school to high school to university, subject matter becomes very much isolated and more categorical. But having a STEM type of approach from early childhood through university helps students better academically link learning across, which is sometimes, we hear the term interdisciplinary, so that's across the disciplines, but between, and the way that those blendings take place is probably a more accurate way to describe what's transdisciplinary learning. And so looking at those multiple domains, we transition from STEM to STEAM with the inclusion of art. And art is not simply just something we add to the framework and create STEAM. It serves more as a multiplier. And so what I mean by multiplying is that it amplifies the cognitive and creative abilities of learners through very, very precise types of actions that are social. And so when students collaborate, they socialize, they work on a project, they build things, they create, they design, and that helps students develop a more multidimensional, multifaceted understanding of critical innovative thinking. And so again, this research I'm doing is more about the practice that's out there already and what's taking place, and having a unified approach that teachers and educational leaders can better qualify the cognitive, social, emotional learning that students need. And so that's one of the wonderful benefits of going from STEM to STEAM, is that it's not simply the cognitive learning, it's the social emotional learning. And so when we think about STEM education, it's more of an aesthetic approach when we go to STEAM. So the benefit here is that in STEM, it's typically, science, tech, engineering, art, or science, tech, engineering, and mathematics. But when we include the art piece, there's a creativity that occurs where it's helping students creatively design, creatively problem solve for nurturing unique open-ended thinking and enhancing scientific processes. Now, in the work I'm doing, I'm trying to create a roadmap for interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary learning through STEAM. And it includes 6 points: how students learn, how teachers design curricula, which obviously it's not isolated anymore, it's very integrated, and something called professional erudition. And that's where teachers are going back and developing new skills, but they are interacting with others, so you're not working in isolation. And that STEM to STEAM philosophy, again, enhances the creativity within learning and inquiry. And so there's instructional leadership development that needs to take place. And there's also organizational leadership that needs to be in place from either, supervisors, whether they're department chairs or assistant principals, or then when you go into larger communities like the superintendents. So in unifying aspects that are important here towards the end of my presentation, there's an experiential learning component, which is learning by doing. It's hands-on, looking at real-world types of tasks so that it applies to students' learning, but there's constructivism. So you're constructing the knowledge, you're creating problem-solving possibilities through hands-on learning. And art in STEM promotes teamwork and cooperation, which is extremely important as a life skill. We all have probably worked with different types of people in our lives that are not very collaborative, and they probably lack very healthy communication skills. But when we include the STEAM philosophy, students naturally develop these skills because they work on them continually. And so you have emotional growth. And in those ways, hopefully one thing students develop in the literature is empathy and eventual stress management for managing their own lives. So STEAM skills, especially those that are critical and creative thinking based, those are life skills. And art's role in STEM is to employ that creativity for design thinking and for future job-ready positions that may not even exist yet, but students are developing skills to be able to hold those positions that will be needed in the future. So steps in STEAM and integration would obviously be curriculum development, collaboration among teachers, and not just the science teachers collaborating with science teachers. It's the science teachers collaborating with art teachers, with the mathematics teachers, your tech engineering teachers. And so there's design-based challenges within the STEAM program for students to be able to provide their own types of applications and own thinking, which creates limitless classroom experiences. They're hands-on, so students are using their visual skills, but also their auditory, their practical types of kinesthetic learning. Art is naturally a visual type of process. And so those schemas for students to develop academic and socially constructive skills are life skills that students can employ for the rest of their lives. The teachers, again, they're collaborating, they're not working in silos, and their curricular design and professional collaboration is with many other teachers unlike them. So actionable strategies include project-based assignments and creative assessments. Those creative assessments allowing students to express themselves and to utilize different types of learning. Digital platforms or digital communities of practice means that students can collaborate with others, maybe not even in their schools or communities, across digital platforms for creative thinking. And then teacher collaboration obviously promotes teacher growth. So in conclusion, a couple of main areas would be that the addition of art integrates a STEAM philosophy for not only cognitive development, but social emotional growth in learners. And that serves as a multiplier. STEAM is not merely about adding to art, but about transforming learning into a creative, holistic process. And so it's about creating a community of learning within and outside of those classrooms. And so I really appreciate your time this morning. If you ever feel the need to contact me, there's my contact information at my university. Again, I work at a university just outside Chicago, and I'm happy to open this up to see if anyone has any questions.